Steve Schmidt, I think that one of the mistakes the media covering the first impeachment made was to constantly push it through a political filter. And through that political filter, the Republican senators, the jurists, were fact immune. And they so much as admitted it after the fact. I think this time, this impeachment is really not about politics. Trump's out. He's basically deplatformed. But there is a Homeland Security crisis that in some ways he brought into full view by revealing what the New York Times has started reporting on pretty aggressively, ties between Republicans, sitting Republican members of Congress, and domestic terrorists and white militia groups. I wonder from the security perspective what you think the consequences are if these Republicans seem to do, through their inaction, what Donald Trump did in his debate with Joe Biden, basically telling the militias, telling domestic terrorists, stand back and stand by. We're not going to touch Trump.
If that happens, if there is no accountability imposed for the inciters, along with the incited who committed acts of violence, who for the first time in American history since 1797 bloodied the transfer of power, the peaceful transition of power. That's what they did. The Capitol fell to those men and women. They tore down the American flag. They raised the MAGA flag. If there is not accountability, this will happen again, and there will be political violence in this country. This was a crowd that was filled with white supremacists, with white nationalists, with extremist militias, with neo-Nazis, with Proud Boy fascists. And this group that's being arrested all over the country was incited. They were incited by Trump. They were incited by Hawley. They were incited by Cruz, by McCarthy, by the big lie that the election was stolen. And during the months where that lie was propagated as it spread around the country by Donald Trump, by Fox News and Newsmax and OAN, the consequence of that was the poisoning of democracy and the attack where the Capitol of the United States fell for a period of hours to violent insurrectionists who tore down our flag and raised the MAGA flag.
You know, Steve, it seems like this vote isn't even about staying in the good favor of the Trump base. This is about whether or not you want Trump to take over and lead the party again in 4 years, because the notion that isn't the clear intention. That's what this vote seems to be about. And I think if you've got Mitch McConnell speaking out now about the QAnon character in the House, and you've got Liz Cheney under, I think, a pushback that may not have been anticipated. I think people thought she was as safe as a House Republican could be. She's now got Matt Gaetz and all the Trumpists in her district attacking her. What do you think this vote is about on whether to convict Donald Trump?
It's about whether they'll be faithful to their oath of office and they'll be faithful to their oath as jurors. If they will consider the facts, or they've decided to nullify the evidence by placing their loyalty to a man, Trump, above their oath. And most of them have done that and have continued to do that for some time now. But that's fundamentally what this is about. You know, look, in the end, Liz Cheney is the leader of the Democracy Caucus, a minority of House Republicans. Kevin McCarthy is the leader of the Autocracy Caucus. Matt Gaetz has said that Donald Trump is the forever leader of the Republican Party and has declared him the leader of the America First movement, which, like the last America First movement 85 years ago, is a fascistic movement. Donald Trump, of course, is in control of the Republican Party. The QAnon movement is in control of multiple Republican state parties. The walls have been breached. Mitch McConnell tried to ride the tiger for a very long time. He thought that he could maneuver his way through this. But the insanity that has let loose, that did not face any resistance, has now consumed the Republican Party. That's what this vote means.
You know, Elizabeth, as sort of the student of extremism and counter-extremism, I've been so drawn to your analysis of what extremists here in our politics. And with all the reporting about the ongoing threat, the federal law enforcement, the DHS, issued a bulletin extending through April 31st, warning of an ongoing threat from domestic violent terrorists associated with the insurrection of the Capitol. What would an acquittal over the incitement of the insurrection, how would that be read by the extremists themselves, Elizabeth?
So it's likely to further embolden them that there is at least a willingness on the right for them to continue to associate politically and just be encouraged by right-wing, movement or figureheads. Put it another way, if he is impeached and they actually convicted him, the impact that has is for I think it's an estimated 57 million people that still believe that the election was stolen, 57 million of his voters. If you convict, then there's this opportunity to educate and inform those 57 million that, in fact, he lied to you. The election was not stolen. But that has to come from voices that they're listening to. It is, sadly, it's not this show. It's not my voice. It's not Steve's voice. It has to come from the people that voted for Trump, in large part the elected officials that represent in Congress. If they would come out and say, he lied to you, I lied to you, I am sorry for that, the election was not stolen. What that does is that shrinks that 57 million down to a much more tangible or a number that security forces could actually handle. Because, and again, I'm not saying 57 million would radicalize to violence, but some small percentage of them will be vulnerable to neo-Nazis. They're actively recruiting them. I mean, I am reading online postings of neo-Nazis and Proud Boys that are giving instructions of how to go about approaching a disheartened Trump supporter or a disheartened QAnon adherent. Here's how you talk to them. Here's how you encourage them to move away from the GOP and into this fascist third way that they describe. That is a very frightening thing, that when you have 57 million Americans who are very angry that their government is not legitimate because the election was stolen from them, they could be prey for these extremist groups. So if we do not debunk this lie through the impeachment process, we are likely to see increases in recruitment and increases to violence. If you insert doubt into that information cycle, that the conservative infotainment echo chamber, we're able to start shrinking. It won't reduce everything. We will still have violence, I fear, in the next few months, but maybe not as much.
I mean, it's just to hear you say we will still have violence, you fear, in the next few months. I mean, what is your threat assessment of the chances or propensity for violence around the impeachment trial next week, Elizabeth?
Well, I think that the law enforcement notification, the bulletin, the fact that the Capitol has this massive fence perimeter around it, I think that has sent the signal that Washington, D.C. might not be the best target. I could be wrong, and I hope I'm not. My bigger concern would be as we start seeing temperatures warm, people gathering in groups outside, maybe as the pandemic wanes and we start having more mass gatherings, those are targets of opportunity for violent extremists. Their ideology is that they're looking for a civil war. They're looking for opportunities to accelerate that violence, that societal collapse. And January 6th was a victory for them, a symbolic call to arms that now is the time we can actually do it. We can have this civil war, overthrow the U.S. government, and establish our white nation. So the violence is still going to be there. We need to shrink the number of people that are associating with these movements.